Shooter ready. Stand by.
Hello, and welcome back to Shooter Ready FM with me, your host, John Shank. Today, we're going to be talking about the Haley Strategic D5 AK class, which is actually the class that gave me the whole idea to do this podcast in the first place. And we're going to be doing something a little different, a little unconventional in that this is totally off the cuff. I don't even have a script written, to be honest with you. So we're going to see how much I remember and take it from there. With that said, let's make ready. As I had mentioned, this is the class that inspired me to make this podcast to begin with, as there were a lot of students there who were obviously into shooting, had good gear, knew how to shoot, but had never really had any formal instruction. And I spent a lot of my time in the class kind of telling people how to take a class, which seems kind of unusual. So I thought maybe a podcast would be a good way to disseminate this kind of information in order to make everybody's lives easier and maybe make classes run a little bit smoother. The class itself ran the course of 3 days and contained a lot of academic information on shooting and was an unusual mix of kind of carbine 1.5, and precision shooting things that I didn't really expect. For instance, a majority of the first day was a discussion about their instruction methodology and why they teach things the way they do. And then they went into a little bit of the technical information on AKs, particularly in how to zero them, which I found pretty interesting, but just due to time constraints, we didn't have the chance to do. As a side note, I have a Polish AK that has a very interesting optics rail on it. On top of that, I have an EOTech 512. So like hide over bore is very much something that I have to be concerned about. So I would have liked the time for a professional to kind of help dial me in on that, because as we'll discuss later, what I thought was a laser beam of a rifle turned out to be more of a shotgun of a rifle. And that was a pretty big surprise. During this discussion on zeroing, they were talking about repeatability and the concept of how different factors in your environment affect the accuracy of your firearm. Some of these being humidity, elevation, ammunition type, ammunition material, and a whole bunch of other things. The way they helped illustrate this was they set up an exercise called telling a story with your rifle. I think this was a really excellent tool to demonstrate some of the principles at play here in a way that I had never thought about. So what we had done was we took a single man-sized silhouette target and we set it up at a few different distances, 200, 100, 50, and 25, and engaged each time with 5 rounds. And over the course of 3 days, we would start every day by doing this exercise with the same type of target. And so that way you could compare your performance at different distances on each day with different factors. For instance, I would record the date, temperature, humidity, brand of ammo, weight of ammo that I use each time. Over the course of the next few days, this really opened up my grouping, right? Because I had dialed in my rifle a day before at an indoor range with pretty good brass ammo. I was using a target that simulated 100 yards for a 5.56 rifle. It should be noted here that I'm using a 5.56 AK. And, granted, I'm making some assumptions here because this is the target designed for an AR, and I figured, how different could it be? And I was theoretically shooting a 1-inch group at 100 yards with this thing, so I felt pretty good about it. However, when we set these targets up and we run the drill, I'm very surprised with how relatively inaccurate I am, comparatively inaccurate. 25 yards, 50 yards, not a big deal. But when we start getting out to 100, it opens up to about 6 inches maybe from what was 1 inch, 1.5 inches on paper at the indoor range. So I'm kind of a little puzzled by that. And then at 200 yards, I am all over the place. And I'm not really sure what to attribute this difference to other than, humidity, ammunition. I was using a different brand of ammunition, but it was still the same bullet weight. and still the same casing. It was brass case. Another factor could be height over bore or mechanical offset, and that maybe I don't understand it as well as I think I do. My AK is a pretty wacky Polish AK that has a pretty chonky optics rail on it. And on top of it is an EOTech 512 because that's how the Polish army does it. So I decided to try to do it too. And mechanical offset is and height over bore are definitely things to be aware of for this that maybe I just didn't take fully into account. Needless to say, like this exercise really opened up my eyes to how those variables affect you like immediately. After that, there were a few minor exercises, kind of an overview of sitting, standing, and prone. Nothing too mind-boggling and really nothing too specific to the AK platform, to be honest. I think the only thing that really stood out in regards to being AK specific was reloading techniques, which weren't anything new to me because I have quite a bit of experience with the AK platform. However, the platform is new to some of the other students, and I think they got a lot out of it. The second day started out with more classroom time that focused predominantly on biomechanics and how your body works with a gun or how a gun works with your body. While this was seemingly academic in nature, it was pretty easy to apply it realistically in our stance. Their take on the stance is a little bit more athletic in that it wasn't totally square to the target, which is a lot more of a conventional shooting position, but there was a slight loading of the feet and a pivot to the hips, which to the untrained eye might look like blading, but it wasn't. I'm probably explaining this very poorly, so what I can do is recommend that you take the class and see for yourself. We went over kneeling and prone positions with AKs as well, which, nothing groundbreaking there other than AK magazines, due to their curvature, are a little funky to get into a good prone shooting position. So that may be something you should be aware of if you ever have to contend with it. Towards the end of the day, we got into some more interesting drills that involve the movement and transitioning between positions. There was some things they said about movement that I found particularly interesting because it kind of directly contradicted some of the other things that I've been told in other classes, particularly in regards to threat scanning, safety actuation, and crossing your feet. I'll start with crossing your feet because I think that's the one that I agree with the most, although I think they're all solid ideas in that in a lot of classes that I've taken that discuss lateral movement, they really harp on you not crossing your feet, which I personally always thought was kind of silly because, like, if I'm in a situation where I have to operate a rifle, I'm not going to be paying attention to my feet, or at least I'm not going to be paying attention to my feet as much as some other things. And that was kind of their philosophy here, in that to cross your feet while moving laterally is natural, and all one can really do is be as careful as they can be while they're directing their attention elsewhere, because you want to free up those cognitive resources to engage a threat and not worry about your feet. You're shooting, you're not in a boxing match. So put that attention where it needs to be. Regarding safety actuation, I know some people probably perked up their ears when they heard about this, and I assure you it was not anything unsafe. And this kind of dovetails with threat scanning or, assessing your environment, in that they had noticed over the course of teaching that a lot of students had developed a training scar that was flipping that safety off as soon as they're on target and then flipping it back on as soon as the target has been engaged. When in reality, you want to keep that safety off until you're absolutely sure you don't have to re-engage that target. Additionally, you don't want to take that safety off in the first place until you're absolutely sure that that target needs to be engaged. In conjunction with this, they were talking about, after you engage a target, a lot of people just reflexively move their head left and right, and they don't really notice anything about their environment. So they made the students think about something they wanted to pick out in the environment so they can make sure that they were assessing things properly. For instance, what's the color of the student to your right's shirt? What's the brand of the student to your left's shoes? that kind of thing makes you take a moment to really register what's going on in the environment and helps you overcome any training scars that may have led you to this kind of robotic automatic movement of just swiveling your head around and not really doing anything to improve your situation or gain actionable information. The day ended with a pretty cool team competition. We split the class into two groups and started out at, I believe it was 25 yards. Each person would take a shot, and once it hit the steel target, they would go gun up and they would rotate to the back of the line. The next person would shoot, and so on and so forth. And this had the effect of gradually walking the firing line back. It should be noted that the teams were a significant distance apart, at least 100 yards, so there wasn't any pointing of firearms in an unsafe direction, particularly as the instructors were very careful to make sure that the students rotated outboard and not inboard so they didn't muzzle each other. I think this was a really fun and cool way to put some of the skills and techniques to the test under the pressure of competition, and people were doing a really good job getting hits from standing on a vital steel, like 8x10 steel target out to 200 yards, which, I mean, of course I knew was possible, but like unlikely maybe given the scenario of a competition and mostly new shooters. So I think that was a great way to really tie it all together. We also got the chance to test drive a Rifle Dynamics AK that one of the instructors had custom made and delivered to the class for them to use at the class. And while I can't guarantee that they're going to do that at every class, I think it is super cool that they let the students do that. So those are the kind of people you're dealing with. The third day started out with some more classroom time where we discussed the science of the eye and how we see things and how we see colors and what determines what we notice when we're acquiring a target or assessing our environment. So that was pretty cool. I think it was probably a little in the weeds for a lot of the people, especially after the competition that we had the prior day. We were all kind of amped up and we wanted to get out onto the range, but I do think this was interesting information. This reminds me that I really wish a lot of instructors would give out like PDFs or maybe like online access to some of their material, because this is definitely stuff I want to learn, just maybe not like learn right then. But okay, back on topic. Back on topic, I promise. Then we went outside and we ran a few refresher drills just to make sure that we really understood the course material of the preceding days. Then once that was out of the way, we proceeded to get the class into the jack drill, which you may have seen on YouTube, Haley or some of his instructors going out and running between, I think it's like 5-6 different stations where they engage from different positions at different distances, and there's a reload involved in there. And one thing that I was kind of pleasantly surprised by was my ability to reload an AK while moving. Not something I had a problem with. Under stress, the lowest kind of stress as far as operating a firearm goes, you just kind of expect those skills to go out the window, but nailed it. So that was cool. And everybody had a really good time with that. And you could tell that they had put a lot of time and effort into developing a drill to tie all the skills together and kind of wrap it up with a bow. I thought that was a very well-designed exercise. My final thoughts on the class are really conflicted because I felt it was a very good beginner or intermediate class. Like if this is one of the first 5 classes you're going to take, like, it is awesome. It's great. There's really a broad range of really solid material that you can use to get a really good jumpstart into tactical riflery. Is that a thing? It is now, tactical riflery. But it's not cheap. So if you're a more experienced shooter, unless there's something like you really, really need to learn that you've heard someone else talk about in this class, I can't say that it justifies the expense. The instruction was excellent. The round count was kind of low. They were very economical and intentional about shooting. And much to my chagrin, there wasn't anything really specific to the AK platform outside of a few very basic mechanical things. So I was kind of bummed about that, but that's kind of an unrealistic expectation on my side, right? Like shooting a rifle is shooting a rifle is shooting a rifle. So my bad. I'm kind of rambling, but hopefully you could tell from the way that I'm speaking that I had a good time at this. The instruction was solid, and any day where I get to go out and shoot is a good day. I guess it's up to you if you think it's worth the price tag, though. Thanks for listening to me jib jab about AKs. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, send it. You can find me on all the socials as Shooter Ready FM. Be sure to join me next month when I'll tell you all about my experience with the Alliance PD CQB Shoot House. Until then, shank out.